Hello and welcome to IR Thinker, where we explore the world of international relations, one critical issue at a time. I'm Martin Zubko. Today's discussion focuses on Kazakhstan nuclear choices. The country's decision to build a new nuclear plant is a worldwide issue, since nuclear power plant represents a significant element in geopolitical constellation. And we are waiting for Kazakhstan's decision if the plant will be built by Russia, China, France or South Korea. However, we'll speak also about nuclear sector and how people perceive this process. My guest today is Eldaniz Gusseinov.
Hello, Martin. Nice to meet you, and thanks a lot for having me here.
Eldaniz Gusseinov is a foreign policy analyst focusing on Central Asia and South Caucasus. And he is also non-resident research fellow at the Haydar Aliyev Center for Eurasian Studies in Istanbul. He is also a co-founder of Nightingale Intelligence, providing data-driven insights on foreign policy, diplomacy, security, and economic development in Eurasia. So we'll speak with Eldaniz today about Kazakhstan nuclear sector. And let's start with the first sort of basic question. Does Kazakhstan need nuclear power for electricity generations? And if so, what are the issues with the current energy sources?
I think NPP is required for Kazakhstan's unification of electricity. And it can also help Kazakhstan to increase its presence, or let's say role in Eurasian and wider Eurasian affairs. So look, as I was in Kazakhstan, now I'm living in Almaty, but I experienced some blackouts last year as I was in my hometown in Akhtal on the seashore of the Caspian Sea. And it was clear enough for me that we actually need to think or consider to have any new sources of energy. In 2017, we had our Expo exhibition, which was dedicated to green energy, but still, we do try to, let's say, enhance or to develop some new plants or to have some new sources of electricity originating from green sources of energy. But I think still we lack some of new sources to be less dependent, at least on some of our neighbors. It was actually one of the reasons why we signed the so-called gas union with the Russian Federation to provide more gas and also electricity to our northern regions. And I remember as I was a student at the first year at my bachelor, I was studying at Kazakh German University. I was taking part at one challenge game, it was some kind of a competition of different business solutions. And we were considering one of the cases like Kazakhstan's energy independency, like having our southern regions and northern regions highly dependent on our neighbors because of the neighbors are source of our energy and electricity for these regions. And by having and integrating more and more some green solutions. But as for me, it's also not clear enough if we can define nuclear as green. It's I think, huge debate nowadays, not only in Kazakhstan, but I think also in energy, let's say, global affairs, if we can really mark or consider nuclear energy as a green energy. And I think we will also elaborate this idea throughout our discussion.
And what are the current trends or moods in Kazakhstan regarding the renewable and classic sources of energy like coal or gas?
I can actually tell you some current numbers because I haven't researched for it yet. But no, I know, I think approximately we do have some plans to become so-called CO2 zero, having CO2 zero emissions by, I think, 2060 or 2050. Never mind. But yeah, I told you, as I know, we have some power plants, for example, some solar plants in Mangostal region, which is quite close, not close, but which is a part of the Caspian region. The same story about all different parts of Kazakhstan, but some recent events also in Europe shows that you should not be over-dependent also on green energy. That's, I think, also the reason why our authorities consider to have some kind of nuclear power plants. As you know, Tokayev announced previously in one of his appeals to the people of Kazakhstan that our government is considering to have 3. NPPs in different parts of Kazakhstan. So like one close to Balkhash Lake, another one close on the seashore of the Caspian Sea in Aktau, in my, not Aktau, in Mangistau region, in my hometown, and also another one, I don't know, in southern or central part of Kazakhstan. So to be less dependent on traditional sources like oil and coal, we also expect some oil decrease. I mean, in extracting oil extraction decrease in the future in Kazakhstan. It's also a reason of our protests because like we have a lot of people employed in the oil sector and also oil and gas sector in Kazakhstan. It's actually mostly the reason for all different protests which occur in Kazakhstan and cover all the regions of our country. Normally, these protests start in western part. I told you my hometown in Aktau or Zhanaozen, and then they spread throughout the whole country. And as I told you, we need some kind of crisis management to tailor this needs of our country in case of energy, and also to be less reliable on oil and gas, and also on some, let's say, factors which we are less influential on, like solar or wind, as I have already underlined in recent events and which took place in Europe. So I think in that sense, also Kazakhstan wants to consider maybe unify energy system of all five, at least four Central Asian countries to have capabilities to export energy, not only, let's say, to Europe, but also maybe to export energy which will be generated from NPPs or from other sources to China or to Afghanistan, or even like further to Pakistan and other parts of Eurasia.
To build a nuclear plant is a very difficult and time-consuming process. So let's speak a little bit how the decision-making process works in Kazakhstan. What roles do the president, the parliament, or the relevant ministries have in this process? And is it possible to say who is a main decision maker regarding the nuclear power plant in Kazakhstan?
So I think our country is becoming less super presidential. At least we have some tendencies to be less super presidential, but I think the main initiative was actually let's say enhance of Kazakhstani president. So it was, I think, his not let's say decision, but at least his intention to have a construction of a NPP on the territory of Kazakhstan. But we should also speak not only about the president or any governmental bodies as a main decision maker, but also about population of Kazakhstan. So we had a referendum, public referendum, and people could actually vote in favor or against of a construction of an NPP in the territory of Kazakhstan. And main issue is, I think, this referendum was the main indicator of public trust in our authorities. So like we didn't experience a lot of, there were no unrests, at least no protests. There were some demonstrations, but no protests against construction of an NPP. People mainly argued, even like most oppositional people towards this decision, some of them argued that we are not against NPP, but we against Russia behind NPP construction on the territory of Kazakhstan. And yeah, when we speak about informing, I think ministries, especially Ministry of Foreign Affairs, ministries which are responsible for energy and for other issues, were on the front line. For example, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they had different delegations with the other ministries of Kazakhstan to, let's say, Hungary, to explore construction of NPP in Hungary, also in Turkey, and they were also, actually we had at the same time, it was actually the case, we had a delegation of Kazakhstan to China with discussion about nuclear power plant construction. At the same time, delegation from Russia on energy was in Kazakhstan. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs took part at Central Asia, South Korea forum in South Korea. And we had also delegations in Ministry of Energy of Economy in France at the same time. So you may consider here some kind of multi-vector nuclear foreign policy of Kazakhstan to have a kind of creating a new bridge or a new platform for controversial partners, for, let's say, counterparts, for powers which have some kind of rivalry, as you know, like in our current geopolitical events. So Kazakhstan sees its, let's say, its role as a, let's say, negotiator, as a state which can bring a raw approach these different actors together in Central Asia, having a common ground, like NPT construction here. But if we will have friends or South Korea or any other actor in this issue, I think we can discuss further. Yeah, so look, president, he has initiative vote, let's say. In this case, we have ministries as main informing actors, and parliament, I think it was kind of, they were partly articulate interests of different, let's say, not game changers, but of different stakeholders. Like there were some public discussions with our population, also with some people who are against or who are still against the decision. There was some, I think, talks with businesses and with entrepreneurs. I think also with some foreign firms which are now operating on the territory of Kazakhstan. So I think in this case we have a parliament as one of articulation tool. We have president as a main initiator and also ministries as a main informing actors.
There are two questions following what you just said, and I think people might be interested in. The first one is, how old is this idea of building a nuclear plant? Like when this idea was discussed for the first time? And the second question people might ask, why during the Soviet times, Soviets didn't build a nuclear plant in Kazakhstan?
Regarding your first question, I think there was even some talks at the beginning of 2000s about construction of NPP, but not on governmental level. I think first this idea came 2022 or like a bit earlier, since we were experiencing some blackouts. We have some old Soviet infrastructure to provide electricity to our population, and it always, it always intended or stimulated some protests. I can tell you, like for example, in my hometown, I told you we are a bit. It's a bit tricky when it comes to protests in Aktau or in Zhanaozen. It's not. We are okay if a protest occurs somewhere in northern Kazakhstan or like in Almaty or in southern Kazakhstan, in any part of Kazakhstan, despite western Kazakhstan, because of our, let's say, that we are used, like because of any kind of signals that if something happens in Western Kazakhstan, especially in Aktau or Zhanaozen, it's always like tricky, dangerous for the whole country. And I told you, we had some protests, people protesting or having demonstrations because of blackouts, because of problems with water provision, by the way. And all this kind of issues, they can always like grow to something else, like it from just a level of communal, of level of just ordinary people. It can have some political, let's say, aims behind it. People can, like unite and they can discuss, okay, maybe it's not only about some communal issues, but maybe it's also about policy in our country. And I told you it's a bit tricky. So I think this is one of the reasons having NPP, like I told you, provision of energy in the whole Kazakhstan. Regarding your second question, and also you should not forget that our population is growing so fastly. So now we have approximately 20, almost 21 million of people, and it's expected, at least it was expected by some UN bodies, that we will have by 2030 25 million of people, but I think we will have even more. I don't know how it works. I'm not a demography specialist, but our birth rates, they are just, like growing and growing. So I think it's also some kind of considerations behind to have some NPP, to provide electricity to the whole country. And yes, we have also the Soviet old infrastructure. I don't know why it wasn't renewed. It's also kind of, let's say, responsibility of our former authorities, why they weren't taking care of these issues. But nevertheless, now we have what we have, and we should somehow work on it. And regarding your second question, it's a bit intriguing. We have Soviet legacy of nuclear tests on the territory of Kazakhstan, and now you have also Russia as a main candidate to be like a constructor of an MPP on the territory of Kazakhstan. And now you can see like some kind of reconfiguration of our perception, at least of Russia. Like Soviet legacy is Soviet legacy, current Russian Federation is a current Russian Federation. It's like you see citizens of Russian Federation having this Taliban caps on their heads. But 30 years ago, there was like a Russian Soviet campaign, military campaign in Afghanistan against Taliban. And in this sense, I would underline that this was the main actually issue of, I mean, main inspiration for people who were against the decision. So like we have previously we have already experienced we had experienced this nuclear tests in Semipalatinsk in Semi close to Semi city, and now why should we have actually again a new nuclear power plant in the territory of Kazakhstan? But I mean we have a clear distinction or difference between both issues. You have nuclear tests on the territory of Kazakhstan, and you have a nuclear power plant. And also, I think one of the reasons why Kazakhstan decided, or at least announced, kind of having a joint venture or like having a consortium of different countries was also an attempt to address these people needs, these people demands somehow having less Russia involved in this project. But I also have an assumption how this consortium can look like, but I think it's another question which you raise.
That little element, I mean, it's little now, but it was a big issue in the past, the nuclear testing, might also have influence on the decision-making process of building a nuclear plant. That nuclear testing sites, they are like close or people live around, or how can we imagine those sites? Is it a big area or smaller area? How would you characterize that?
It's a big area, and we had also still have people who really suffered from this nuclear tests. I tell you, it's a part of our public memory. People do always reminded. People do remember these events. And same as like hunger during Soviet time, and also this nuclear tests. When we all, like if you have debates about Soviet legacy, on one side you have Gagarin, on another side you have always this conversation about nuclear tests in Semipalatinsk. We always talk and learn about it in our schools in Kazakhstan. In all schools, we always have discussions about nuclear tests in Kazakhstan and Semipalatinsk, and people who were affected by birth. So I can't really explain it, but people with some injuries, only by birth, because they were living close to this nuclear tests. And I don't know, no, I know it has, I told you, it's a huge impact in our public memory in Kazakhstan.
Let's speak now about the response from the civil societies, NGOs or activists in Kazakhstan. We mentioned, as you pointed out, the governmental level, how the decision process works. But what is the response of the NGOs? Do you have any, let's say, independent studies published? Do you have any scholars that are interested in this topic? Maybe they are part of some NGOs movement, and this balances the governmental narrative, so the regular Kazakh person can go online and can read about how the nuclear power plant will work, how the nuclear power plant will influence Kazakhstan's energy security.
I think the issue of NPP also increased our civil society, let's say, engagement, not only with our governmental bodies, but also, I mean, among each other. I can explain you why, because I think it was one of the boldest decisions of our government to initiate construction of NPP, given our Soviet legacy of nukes testings in eastern Kazakhstan. And in that sense, there was some investigations, some studies conducted that actually Kazakhstan doesn't really need any NPP on its territory, or it can also worsen some kind of our ecology or anything else. Yeah, I mean, I told you there were also some demonstrations against this kind of decision, but I have already said referendum and participation of people in this referendum was some kind of temperature measure in our society. Like, okay, we know everything can happen during votings in Kazakhstan. I don't think I need to tell anything about it, but still, if you have some faults or some negative events occurring during referendum, people will know about it. People can always protest against it. And if it goes too much, people will definitely try to demonstrate somehow to show the view on that issue. And I told you why is it one of the boldest decision of Kazakhstan to have NPP? Because it's actually it's a part of each person of each Kazakhstan citizen's responsibility because it can possess some threat to our lives, to our living in Kazakhstan. It can possess some kind of difficulties. It has a huge geopolitical shift in our foreign policy if Russia will be one of the main share holders in this consortium. Yeah, and I think people start understanding the social responsibility even like higher. This feeling of social responsibility became higher in our society in Kazakhstan. And this is, I think, the main issue to consider. So yeah, I think at that sense, people also demonstrated. I think majority of Kazakhstani partly demonstrated their trust in our president. It's not about our government, but in our president, because I told you he was actually one of the main decision makers in this issue, because he initiated construction of an MPP, and he has still, I mean, his legislation period, I think, until 2029. So it will even like this MPP will exist. I mean, will be constructed even after he will finish his duty as a president. Yeah, I mean, there was some studies conducted. People still argue, okay, we just can renew our Soviet infrastructure. We can have maybe increase gas extraction or oil extraction. We can build some new infrastructure throughout Kazakhstan. But I think still it's not about even maybe economic benefits for our country. I think still there are some geopolitical considerations, and they are of higher importance for our country becoming like kind of energy hub for Eurasia, like having maybe China and Russia cooperating on the construction of consortium. I think France will also have its part in this process, and being able to export energy to Europe, making Europe more dependent, let's say, on Kazakhstan and Eurasia, and creating this kind of supply chains, which will be quite hard to interrupt. I mean, in the case of occurring or having some wars or conflicts between states, because independency will be much higher if all these projects will come true.
Many people also think when it comes to nuclear plant, if the government is going to appoint some sort of major consultant firm. How is this in Kazakhstan? Is it going to happen?
No, I think we now have some energy consulting companies which also consult our government. We have also Ministry of Energy. I think at least this is kind of a new tradition in Kazakhstan and also in our public service, because almost each ministry has its own think tank. One, the independent think tank or kind of independent think tank, which has some affiliation with the ministry, and also some think tanks within the ministries, of within each ministry in Kazakhstan, which do make some consultations, write some policy briefs for ministers and also for our president. So yeah, I told you, we do also order some our public servants or our ministers do also order some policy briefs from some international consulting companies to be more informed about this kind of decision.
How does Kazakhstan's status of being a leading uranium producer inform its domestic nuclear energy ambitions? What sort of part in this process does this important element play?
a huge, really. First, I think we will have some new capacities to enrich uranium on the territory of Kazakhstan. As you know, Uzbek and Kazakh uranium, which is being exported to European markets, first goes to Russia. It will be enriched there, and then it can be exported to European markets. You know, like Macron was, by the way, in Uzbekistan, and there were even some labels, some announcement. Now Uzbekistan will stop enriching its uranium in Russia and will have some facilities on its own territory to have some direct export to Europe. I mean, along the middle corridor. It didn't come through. So as you may see, I think it will definitely improve our position in global uranium affairs. Now you can see actually a Russian company leaving some joint ventures with Kazakhstan and selling it to Chinese companies. Like in the case of Zarechnoye, I forgot the name of it, of the joint venture here in Kazakhstan. There were 2 or 3 joint ventures which Russia is not more a member of, but Chinese companies bought Russia's share in these companies. And I think it's also a kind of indicator that Russia is going to construct this NPP in Kazakhstan. I can explain you why. Look, these 3, let's say, plants, uranium plants, they were discovered many years ago. And now they're almost not over, but still there's something to extract. But Russia has, at least it has now a huger, a bigger plant in Kazakhstan, which it can now concentrate its whole resources for. And I think this main plant, which Russia now is extracting in Kazakhstan, will be part of uranium, part of the NPP construction. At least we have now 3. It's thought to have 3 NPPs, but if we will have even only one single NPP, in that sense, it's a first indicator why I think Russia will have a bigger shareholder in our consortium. Second indicator, now some of branches of Russian technological universities were opened in Kazakhstan, where also some nuclear physics will be prepared or will be educated. And I think it's also a sign why. Why, namely, Russian universities will have their own branches in Kazakhstan. Why not French, for example, universities with their own branches, or Chinese universities where some nuclear physics or specialists can be prepared? Of course, it's all because of our plans to have an NPP. And I think in this regard, Russia's role in the NPP construction will be following. Firstly, I think provision of some technological knowledge, because Rosatom is quite known. I mean, if you like or not Rosatom, if you like or not Russian Federation, still it has some huge experience in constructing NPP worldwide, at least in Eurasia, let's say. We do have China, of course. It's also they have a facility in eastern Kazakhstan. Some Chinese companies, they do also use our uranium for some of their NPPs, by the way, in China. But in that sense, I think China can Russia's approach will be following. First, provision of technological knowledge of a construction, maybe being a leading partner, which will be somehow coordinate the whole process of the construction. And secondly, also educating specialists and also, let's say, labor force for the construction of an NPP in Kazakhstan because of the opening of these new branches of Russian universities in Kazakhstan. When it comes to China, I think China will help to construct some facilities to enrich uranium, since now also Chinese share in our whole uranium production is also growing after this latest deals between Russia and China. And I think that the third actor which can be involved in the construction of NPP can be France. And by the way, you know, like the NPP, at least the first NPP will be constructed near Balkhash Lake. It's in southern Kazakhstan. And there was an agreement signed during one water summit. It was, I think, December 2024. It was agreement signed between Kazakhstan and France that French companies will conduct some environment and sustainability research studies near Balhash Sea. So I think in that sense, French companies can be responsible for any kind of ecological impact of MPP construction and also for sustainability of the whole project. And I think this is the way how our government will address any kind of negative attitudes, negative, let's say, moods arising from our society regarding first Soviet legacy and second regarding Russia and negative attitude towards Russian Federation. Having France as a neutral actor, which more and less can be favorable for our people as a partner which will somehow observe the whole sustainability process, the whole ecological process will definitely help to our government to address all the issues arising from our population.
Eldaniz, we talk about Russia, France, and slightly about China. But now let's imagine that we have four countries, and let's imagine four scenarios that each country, let's say, won the contract. And we want to sum up what might happen geopolitically, perhaps energy security issues, and let's go country by country.
Well, thank you so much. So I think if we take the first option, if Russia wins and I mean gets the whole card play from this issue, I think of course it will be definitely a public issue. Some people maybe go into protest against this decision because of some negative perception of the Russian Federation against the backdrop of the war in Ukraine. Definitely. I mean, one of the main reasons to have a consortium was in addressing the issue of the Soviet legacy or of people somehow combining or considering Russia and Soviet Union together. I told you, after the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, they have a kind of split in the Kazakh society. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry about it. You know, like me as a Kazakhstani citizen, I would not like to see or to observing this kind of trends in my homeland. But that's true in my motherland. That's true. We have some kind of split. People having with different demographic indicators, with different ethnic, maybe some kind of ethnic backgrounds, with different linguistic backgrounds, having also different views on the war in Ukraine, and also different perception of Russian Federation. So we have younger generation people. Some part of them are more pro-European views. It was also I mean, you can also have also some polls from mini conference, and they were polling people of Kazakhstan regarding the favorites in, I mean, among external actors, and they just could figure out that yes, a majority of people are more and less pro-Chinese and pro-Russian, but there was a tendency, at least there's a tendency among young people having more pro-European views. We have more Erasmus exchanges, by the way, starting from 2022 with the European Union, rather than with CIS, Common Independent States, with the members of the Common Independent States, also vis-a-vis with Russia, let's say, in this case. And of course, it has also its own impact or its own implication on the whole discussion on the NPP construction in the territory of Kazakhstan. Of course, people have they feared that if Russia will become part of the consortium, at least a majority, let's say, having a majority share in this consortium will lead to a high dependency of Kazakhstan on the Russian Federation. Yeah, that's true, because if you have a nuclear power plant, it means that someone should also have kind of services providing for the operation of the nuclear power plant. The same like with the Akku in Turkey, it will definitely indicate relations between Russia and Turkey for decades. Yeah, clear. Same with Kazakhstan. If Russia will build this nuclear power plant, Russia will have always, let's say, a footprint on our country, at least like having always NPP And it means that we should always have some kind of good relations and working on some negative issues which reshape operation of this NPP. But it's not only about Kazakhstan. I can't imagine having NPP with Russia as a majority shareholder in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, and then Kazakhstan having French NPP company, I mean construction company for our NPP. For me, it's less imaginable, to be honest. So I don't know how they will also communicate with each other if something will occur. Also, you should take a note that the three entities will be located not far from each other, by the way. And I think it's just a broader plan of the Russian Federation to unite our energy system as it was in the Soviet time. I don't know, approximately 2 months ago, there was also an offer from the head of Rosatom, if I'm mistaken, to build an NPP on the territory of Tajikistan, by the way. And there was the five states, at least three states, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan have already, no, it's more about Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan have already signed an agreement to integrate the energy systems to have more capacities of energy to export it to European markets. And how it can be possible if Kazakhstan signed the so-called gas union with the Russian Federation to address all the needs of gas and energy? How it can be possible if Kazakhstan experiences blackouts so much? Of Uzbekistan, same story. It's almost about all Soviet post-Soviet Central Asian states. I mean, I think it's also can be a case in Turkmenistan, but they have their own projects when it comes to energy. So from my point of view, Russian main idea or main strategic aim of the Russian Federation in Central Asia to construct this NPP to unify our energy systems of Central Asian countries to enable energy export to European markets. If you take, for example, if you read these agreements which were signed between between Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan, and by the way, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have already expressed their interest to join this agreement, and there are some meetings taking place between energy ministers of these five Central Asian countries, except Turkmenistan. So just if you take a look on the content of this agreement, there is no clear definition of what green energy means. So nuclear energy in this sense can be also defined as a green energy, which can be exported to European markets or which can be used for internal needs of Central Asian countries to free, I mean, to have some new capacities which can be exported. If you understand what I try to explain, there's some particular developments in the creation of the so-called Green Corridor between Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, which will actually unite Central Asia with Europe, because the Green Corridor will go first from Central Asia through the Caspian Sea, so the South Caucasus, mainly through Azerbaijan, Georgia, Black Sea, and then Romania and Hungary. So, and in that sense, you will also have some kind of, you have a footprint of Russian Federation and maybe also of China in this project, because Russian Federation will construct this NPPs in Central Asian states, which will enable to the states to export some energy to European markets. And also, it can be an issue, like it definitely will deepen Russia's presence in Central Asia. But regardless, I can tell you that even if South Korea would win this, will win this game for the whole, for the possibility to be the only constructor of NPP, I think it will be definitely it will have some contacts with Russia and China because of their shares in our uranium production in Kazakhstan. So like even France or if even France or South Korea will be part, will have an opportunity to be the only constructor. They will definitely communicate with both Russia and China because of their role and influence in the uranium sector in Kazakhstan. So nevertheless, Russian Federation. Of course, it will increase Russia's presence in Kazakhstan, not only in Kazakhstan, but also in all Central Asian countries. It will completely enable to Russia to have new capacities to export energy from Central Asia to Afghanistan, to Pakistan, under the framework of the Russian Federation. Like it will be not the framework of a consortium. It will be completely a framework of the Russian Federation, and they will have their hands free to do that, to promote projects to export energy to also South Caucasus, to European markets, or even to have some new, let's say, tools to somehow not to make pressure, but somehow, like be more powerful than China in Central Asian affairs, because Chinese are also look for any new sources of energy coming from Central Asia when it comes to mineral resources, when it comes to also coal. Like that China wants to increase coal import from Mongolia, and that's the reason why they construct this railway, which will connect coal fields with the Chinese factories. And reverse, we can have Central Asia and also Xinjiang, which is quite growing, booming when it comes to population size. It also has some impact on Central Asia, especially about some rivers like Irtysh, and volumes of water coming to Kazakhstan decreasing because of Xinjiang population growing. But okay, it's just an example to understand the whole situation better. And I think in that sense, Russia will have also some new tools to maybe influence China because of maybe increased electricity import from Central Asia to Chinese market. Okay, when it comes to China, I think of course it will be a game change completely, because we have Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan with their own nuclear power plants constructed by Russian companies. By the way, I think same scenario which I have already told you about Chinese companies enriching uranium and Russian companies dealing with the construction of an MPP. Something similar is happening, by the way, in Uzbekistan, because now Chinese companies, they increase their presence in uranium sector in Uzbekistan. Now they have new deals to extract uranium in Uzbekistan. And I'm definitely sure it's all because of MPP construction in Russia. They also consider to have maybe some kind of a consortium, by the way. There was some thoughts and even some talks in this regard in Uzbekistan. And yeah, I told you, it will be some kind of a game changer, because now you have China as a leading partner in the construction of MPP. Of course, they will have some contacts with Russia because of uranium provision to this MPP, but I mean, it will also definitely mean that the whole supply chain will be completely oriented on China, because China will provide some services for the operation of MPP on the territory of Kazakhstan. Some new agreements will be signed between both countries. Now we have actually lower all different pitfalls for the integration between Kazakhstan and China. We have now a free visa regime between Kazakhstan and China. It will go even deeper if China will be the main and the only constructor of MPP in Kazakhstan. If we will have a France as a main constructor, I think it will be definitely Russia will definitely and China, I think as well, will perceive it quite negatively. I can tell you, because they perceive France as a geopolitical actor in Kazakhstan. Just have a comparison how Russian media were reporting about heads of Germany visiting Central Asia, and how they were reporting about French state heads visiting Central Asia quite differently, because they perceive France as one of the, I think even like as a leading actor in European Union, and also one of the main, I think, rival in the European Union for both, I think, for Russia and also for China in that sense. So of course, some kind of trust in among Russian authorities in Kazakhstan will decrease. Maybe they will also consider any ways how they could maybe interrupt construction of MPP by some French companies on the territory of Kazakhstan. And I think the same scenario we can apply for South Korean company. But for me, I don't even consider South Korea because they also decreased their activities in Central Asia. If you remember, last year there were some highest level visits from South Korea to Central Asia. They even announced this program so-called Roll. And now they have some internal problems in South Korea with presidential elections, with presidential legislation, and so on. So I think it's highly possible that this year even no South Korea Central Asia summit will take place. At least it was planned to have one. Uh, During the visit of a president of South Korea, it was announced that the summit will take place this year, 2025. But now I don't see even any signs of planning organizing this summit. So yeah, I think they definitely decreased the activities in Central Asia. So I don't see any space for South Korea in this consortium, but maybe I'm wrong. But I told you, Russia as a main technological power in that sense, and also provision of labor forces. China enriching uranium for the construction of MPP, and France conducting some kind of environmental studies, and also observing all the standards for the construction of MPP.
So I'm interested, like how do you perceive the contract? Do you expect that only one country will take everything, or do you expect that maybe it will be the cooperation and it's gonna be a multinational consortium?
I told you it can be definitely a multinational consortium, but otherwise it wasn't explained in that way. And I think this can be a tricky issue because, yeah, they had some selection process of these four companies which were selected to be like candidates to construct or to be like a part of a consortium. But I think consortium as itself was announced as one of, how to say it, as one of the options and not as a leading idea for our authorities. So yeah, it can be possible that, for example, only one single state will manage to build this consortium. It can be also a consortium, but our to build this MPP, sorry. But I told you, President Tokayev, he announced to have three MPPs throughout Kazakhstan. So it can be possible that the selection process was only for one single NPP
I
near
see.
Balkhash, but not for all two other NPPs in other parts of Kazakhstan. And in that sense, I think some other companies could also join. Maybe some American companies. I know there was some also some negotiations, some talks about the participation in this process. Yeah.
And do we have any time schedule or time framework when the decision is going to be announced?
Until the end of this year.
End of this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And how is Kazakhstan suitable for nuclear plant regarding security? For instance, when we speak about nature, like earthquake or bad climate or climate change, which are those latest trends that are discussed when you build a nuclear plant? Because usually the study for the nuclear plant is 10, maybe 7 years old, and the climate change is rapidly progressing. So we see the areas where the climate change completely changed the landscape and the situation of surroundings. So for instance, we can say 10 years ago or 15 years ago, this was ideal place to build a nuclear plant, but nowadays it is not. So how is this issue handled in Kazakhstan?
That's a good question. I can't answer it completely from technological side, let's say, or from some ecological side. But when it comes to South Kazakhstan and where the power plant is going to be constructed, it's always about the issue of overheating, of warming. And like we had some problems with water provision 2 years ago. It led to a kind of conflict between Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan on the border because of water shortages. We had some, we just lost our whole vegetable plants in southern Kazakhstan, and it always leads to price increase. when it comes to vegetables or fruits in Kazakhstan. Like if you come to Central Asia, you'll see that actually prices for foods, I mean, at least for fruits and vegetables, can be higher than in Europe. And it's one of the reasons behind, because of lack of water. And in this case, from political view, this, I mean, at least this region can be a bit dangerous for the construction of MPP when it comes to some kind of unrest or some kind of people disagreement because of food security, because of water security. And also, of course, Afghan neighborhood is also an issue. But otherwise, it means that if Russia, for example, or China construct MPP, they will be forced, like on just forced to increase the security presence and increase any kind of security guarantees for the whole region against any threat which can arise, for example, from Afghanistan to the region. It will be definitely, like kind of, an issue which will always attract the attention to the region. Because, of course, Russia just increased its activities in Central Asia after the start of the war in Ukraine. I don't know, just some examples from Kazakhstan. Now, each second foreign company registered in Kazakhstan is Russian or belong partly or completely Russian company. Comparing 2021, 2022, we had enormous growth of Russian investment projects in Kazakhstan. Our deputy foreign minister recently, during the visit of Lavrov to Kazakhstan, said that Russia is the main investor in Kazakhstan. But according to all other announcements, it always was said that actually the Netherlands was the main investor in Kazakhstan. But Russia is the main investor because the Netherlands is the main investor because a lot of Russian and Chinese companies invest in Kazakhstan through the branches in the Netherlands, especially oil and gas extraction companies do that. And I think now Russia is the main investor because they also increase the number of investment projects. And all of this always will inspire Russia to increase it will be kind of a clue, like a clue which always some kind of cement Russian presence in Central Asia. Same about China, if a Chinese company will construct this MPP in Kazakhstan, of course. So I think it will definitely it can be some security factor. If you construct an MPP, it will be always like kind of security guarantor for the region because of the whole events. It definitely, the states will be forced to invest more money in the security of the region and to take some steps towards it. You inspired me also to one of ideas, because if a state has decision to construct NPP, it's also important. An integral part of the whole process is provision of security for NPP. Of course, like if any terrorist organization attacks an NPP, it will have a catastrophic consequences for not only for one country but the whole region. And imagine it will be, at least the first one will be constructed not far from Balkhash. And if you just take a look on the map, it's one of the most populated regions in the, Balkhash region itself and its surrounding. If you take a look at its surrounding, it's not far from China, from Xinjiang. It's not far from most populated regions of the whole Central Asia, like Fergana Valley, by the way. And of course, construction of MPP, it's also a question of security. And I think it will also lead to any kind of involvement of third parties, let's say, of external actors to be more presented in security affairs of the regional. And of course, for the Russian Federation, to be like a security, let's say, guarantor in the middle of the middle, in the heartland of Eurasia, if you just imagine that everything happened, that everything came true. They have MPP in Central Asia, unified energy system, which enable to export electricity to China, to South Asia, to European markets. It means that the state which will control the whole process, which will provide security to the region, which generates energy for the whole Eurasia, which also is an integral part of the middle corridor, of course. it also demonstrates or signals, gives some signals of increasing influence of the state. And I think whatever state Kazakhstan could choose, it would also definitely mean that either Russia or China would like to definitely increase their security presence in Central Asia because of anything, because of any possible threats coming to these MPPs.
Regarding today's topic, Eldaniz, is there anything that we haven't mentioned yet and you consider as important to stress it because we want to spread the information to people about this topic? And sometimes even you have like 20 questions, but you might forget about some important issues, so therefore I'm asking.
I think the only thing which I want to stress at the end of our discussion is more about public perception of the whole process. I told you it was one of the boldest decisions. I think even the boldest decision from our government ever. I mean, within 35 years of Kazakhstan's independence, which shapes each Kazakhstan citizen's responsibility towards our government and towards Kazakhstan's future. And in that sense, we do have a lot of debates. We have a lot of people trying to express their own view on this issue. Of course, there was some particular punishments from our government for any kind of people arguing, Russia will now construct the power plant. It was considered some of this news were considered as a fake news, like as a disinformation of our authority. So somehow also the government tries to control the whole process. But I think the referendum and the kind of success of the referendum in favor of MPP construction in Kazakhstan, it gives somehow, it makes our government more convinced that there's some, to a particular extent, trust in our authorities, at least in our president, among our population. Because it has a huge political implication for Kazakhstan authorities, yeah. And regarding this climate change, yeah, we also discussed experiences of Japan, of course, in the case of MPP. And I think it's also one of the reasons why our government wants to have a consortium. Just to combine experiences from different states, just to try somehow to cover all different views on this issue. And I told you to have maybe French companies which could somehow maybe observe the whole process and evaluate it. And of course, it will be quite, critical because of Russian and Chinese companies involved in this process.
Right. The last question for today's interview, Eldaniz. We spoke about nuclear energy, but regarding Kazakhstan energy security, which areas for research would you recommend to young scholars, to students, to researchers? And that's something that you feel that this might be attractive area, or this is the area that we might need more papers, more studies for Kazakhstan.
Thank you so much, and I think it's a kind contribution from your side for research of Kazakhstan affairs. I think, of course, first and foremost, geopolitical implications of MPP construction, not only in Kazakhstan but in Central Asia, in a way which I used to describe. I mean, I told you about this whole supply chain process, green corridor. Maybe there can be some research about having some alternatives to MPP in Central Asia, like green energy or hydrogen, or like I forgot this green ammonia. Yeah, or some discussions of not discussions, but there are some plans to construct a plant in Mangostal region to do that. Maybe also to have a kind of scenario analysis, maybe as we discussed it. If Russia takes the leading role, France, South Korea, China, how can it politically and geopolitically reshape Kazakhstan, Russia, Central Asia relations, or in a wider view, whole Eurasian process and the role of Central Asia in the middle of it? And of course, maybe some research about climate change and its impact from, let's say, ecological point of view on the NPT construction. It could be quite, I think, useful for the future of Central Asia.
Eldaniz, many thanks for your insightful thoughts, for your time, and for your information about this particular topic, because it's a fascinating topic to research, and I'm glad that we could develop this episode for researchers, for students, for scholars, and to inform them directly from the source, from Kazakhstan, about Kazakh's nuclear ambitions. Again, thank you very much for being on IR Thinker.
I hope my answers were insightful enough for your audience. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you very much.